The fleshies are weak. They are strong enough when it counts. The one called Careless Whisper, one of the elves, is a particular mystery to me. We were battling a trio of red feathers in the sewers of the old market, and one of them nearly stabbed him in the heart. Only his precious silver mirror stopped the blow from being fatal. This young master is just too pretty to die, he japed. I assure you that I am not, I replied. So stop toying with that fool and kill him. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dungeons and Decisions, a Displaced Beast production, and part 2 of our exploration of our new sample campaign, The Gangs of Newgate. Today, we are going to talk about how to bring your characters, up until now just a lifeless pile of numbers, to life. So, to get us started, I turn the introductions over to Chad.
Hi, I'm Chad. Just Chad. Okay. No alliteration today.
I'm Mark Russell. Good to see all of you virtually.
I'm Mike Matoni, and I'm feeling even more handsome than usual.
And I am Al Barris, your Eternal DM for today, and again, acting as unofficial MC for the beginnings of this podcast. So now I turn the proceedings over to Mark.
So as Al said, this one is really the second part of a series. So if you have not watched the first part, which is our previous episode, you may want to go back and check that out. Because we are going to be talking about a number of characters, 8 of them to be precise, that the 4 of us generated in a character generation example. And those 8 characters are now going to be further developed in various ways today. We're going to talk about ways that you can engage with your character to help kind of bring them more to life. So we're going to go through a number of different categories that you can use to kind of express your personal vision of your character. I think that one of the things that concerned us when we were making this episode is kind of this common perception that the way that you engage with role playing is this kind of like improvisational theater model, right? Where you kind of you wave your hands a lot, you're expressive, you really get into character, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't want people to be intimidated by that kind of common perception and not want to engage with role playing, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. It is a long path up Character Mountain, but there's lots of ways to get to the top. So today we're going to talk about those ways, and Al is going to be up first. So take it away, Al.
This is good, but what is best in life?
Well,
The
clearly,
open step, 3 tours, falcons at your wrist, and wind in your hair. Wrong! Conan, what is best in life?
to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
Thank you. And scene. So for those of you at home, this is one of the key crucial scenes from Conan the Barbarian, and much beloved by all of us. So this is to set up our discussion of how Wizards of the Coast has been nice enough to give us an entry point into exploring our characters. The traits, bond, ideal, and flaw. Now, what we have just enacted from Conan the Barbarian, the only true Conan product, is, well, other than Robert E. Howard's work, of course, is the idea of the ideal. Again, so what does your character value most in this grand world of ours? What do they truly want? And at this point in Conan's life, what he wants to do is wreck stuff, and that is perfectly okay. And that fits with what is going on in his character arc. So we start off with the idea of these set characteristics, which the player's handbook explores in quite a bit of detail. And then we start fleshing those out. So one of the things that I identified for one of my characters, so Shark, who I voiced at the beginning of this episode, Sharkashik, my lizard folk ranger, his flaw, so the weak point, one of the weak points of his character is that he has a fondness for drink. So he is ordinarily, of course, all business, but occasionally he is going to be left unsupervised around a vat of booze, and he is going to be wasted and thus impacted in his interactions with the party. Now, the way that all of these work mechanically during through the game is through the mechanism of inspiration. And I rather like the way that Wizards did this, because other games have a lot more elaborate ways of trying to get you to be in character. And just doing it nice and simply that way, there is a mechanical reward for you actually doing stuff that might hurt your character or kind of screw over the other characters in some cases. There is a reward encouraging you to do that, but it's not enough that it's going to break the game in any particular way. You can only have inspiration once at a time, and it encourages you to spend it and then try again to get another point worth of it. So those traits, bonds, ideals, and flaws, we actually, some of us got to filling those out on the character sheets. I don't think we all got through them, but we do have some examples of those up in the character sheets that we've linked to on the YouTube site. So take a look at those if you want a little bit more detail on what we decided for each of our characters. So that's the starting point that we wanted to get into. Again, Wizards has given us a nice little easy way for us to explore our characters, and rather than just seeing these as another blank on your character sheet you don't fill in, this is actually a pretty useful role-playing tool that you can use to try to flesh yourself out some more before you get started. All right, and I pass the microphone over to Chad.
All right, so I guess the first question I would ask is, why did you get so awesome at your specialization? Why is your character so good at what they do? Some of these thoughts, I think, if you have in the background of how did they grow up and become so powerful, are things that help further develop, you know, how are you going to play that character? So, for example, I have a Golden Child. He's a Divine Sorcerer class, and he specializes in being a support caster. Whether it's healing, buffs, or just a good attaboy, he's the man to help out. For role-playing purposes, Golden Child was raised by one of the church's excommunicated priests, who told him all his life that he was special, that he would make a difference and save the world. And that along with his Azamar good looks and his spark of innate magic being divinely blessed, this has led Golden to spend his entire life in the pursuit of the divine. Now that he is running in a gang, will it be his chance to convert even more believers into saving the world? Or will it mark the start of his fall from grace? For gameplay purposes, I wasn't trying to optimize my character with just 2 key stats and a singular ability, feat, or spell to make him the best at what he does, like the one-punch man. But instead, we're looking at kind of specializing in defining who he is. So in this case, I decided to actually look at his weak stat, like intelligence, which is like an 8 or a 9, I can't remember, to define his personality character. His intelligence is now kind of going to get replaced with his charisma, and hopefully this will shore up any weaknesses with, like, hopefully humorous results. For gameplay purposes, the race of Asmar not only did it work out for kind of role-playing purposes, but it also gave him a charisma bump of +2, which was a great boon to his class. The Protector subclass boost, the +1 to Wisdom, it didn't really do anything for the character, but I think it falls squarely into his need to protect those around him. Plus, at 3rd level, he can use an action to create divine energy within himself and have his eyes glimmer and 2 wings sprout from his back. Golden Child will probably be very insufferable to those around him when he levels up. Finally, for further specialization, all his spells were more cleric-based rather than mage. Mostly healing, like Clear Wounds, buffs like Bless, protection for shield, or Save the Dying, which saves the dying. His only offensive spell is Sacred Flame, which he incorrectly believes only hurts evil people. So basically, people with high dex, which is the saving throw for Sacred Flame, is probably who he thinks is going to be good. How could that go wrong? With both cleric and mage spells available, it'll also give me room to grow my character. More healing if he stays as naive and good self, or maybe more to the dark side with offensive spells if he becomes cynical and bitter with the world around him. Kind of excited to see what happens. For my other character, Eek, it's a goblin. Eek came about as an urchin goblin child who lived below ground in the sewers. He didn't have much interaction with other people. He kind of lived in a self-contained habitat, hunting and being hunted by sewer creatures, and he got really good at it. So much so that the cycle of life and communion with nature, well, sewer nature, came to be his class calling. So while Eek may be out of his elements when above ground and dealing with people, in the sewer, he is at his best. For gameplay purposes, I once again looked at my character's weak stat, which is intelligence, but this time using kind of wisdom as a substitute, which would actually probably makes him a stronger character. As a goblin, he gets a +2 to dex and +1 to con, which are good stats for any class, but doesn't bump his wisdom to the almighty 17 for extra bonuses for the druid class. So with an average strength of 10, he probably won't rely on too many handheld weapons for melee, but with his dex of 16, he'll have a better armor class and use range attacks like his sling. He's also got a primal spell, or primal savagery spell from Xanthor's Guide to Everything. This lets him grow up claws and fangs and attack for 1d10 of damage. So not only does this fit in with my concept of an easygoing, but don't make him angry or watch out if he's hungry creature, but it's a pretty powerful attack. So while not especially optimized, as we've been calling our min-maxing, still each character has been specialized in doing one thing well, whether it's protecting the innocent or catching rat for a nice midnight snack. And Mark.
Yeah, so on the converse of that, why is my character so bad at something? So if you've seen any of our previous videos, you've heard us talk at great length about how being bad at something can actually be role-playing gold. And Mike has made this point especially several times, that it's okay to fail, and in fact, it can be really, really fun.
You fail forward.
Fail forward, yes.
Yeah, fail forward. Okay, so your character is probably bad at something, unless you maybe like fudged your rolls or cheated or just got really lucky. You probably have, one attribute that's below average, or maybe even, a skill that maybe you're not very good at, or you have disadvantage imposed on you from some condition, or maybe you're wearing armor and that keeps you from that gives you disadvantage to stealth. There's lots of kind of ways that your character can be bad at something, and it can be really, really fun to describe exactly how these colossal failures happen. You get a bad roll on climbing, for example, and you get to describe your fall all the way down. You screw up your acrobatics, and that can be, physical comedy gold. And, every kind of utter failure, every mess up is a possibility for role playing. Now, my character, Vic the Vulture, who is a hobgoblin wizard, and very much this kind of scavenger survivalist, he has a low charisma, and he is that's what the kids call the dump stat, and he's going to be bad at all social interaction. So it really kind of makes sense for me to kind of think of him in a way that explains this. And what I kind of came up with is that he's just, because he's, kind of very selfish and individualistic, and has this kind of very, very strong survival instinct, he's always going to be like paranoid and suspicious of others. It's just like how he survives. So he's going to be, kind of one of those guys who's immediately on the offensive. He wants to know your motivation, wants to know why you're doing this, because, it might be dangerous for him. And he's also going to be, very, very obviously self-serving, which is, off-putting, I think, to just about everyone. And very transactional about his interactions with other people, which once again is very off-putting. So it's just going to be this have this manner of interacting with other people that automatically makes him unlikable. And then when he really fails, right, he's already got a penalty to the roll, and if I roll you know, a 1 or a 2, I really get to be spectacular and, you know, trying to get someone to be something, and I call them you know, an idiot and a stinking human or whatever, and just really fail spectacularly. It's very satisfying, and really gives you those moments where you can say, well, okay, I have this really, you know, really unlikable person. If on his worst day, you know, on his biggest failure, like, how bad would he do? And the possibilities are pretty endless. All right, Mike, you're up next.
All right, so oftentimes the narrative of a campaign is driven by the interactions that you have with people outside the party, non-player characters, as well as the relationships and interactions that you have with player characters themselves within your party. So the question becomes, how does your character interact with those outside your party, as well as how do they interact with people inside your party? So one of the characters that I made up was Careless Whisper. He's an elven thief. He is a fallen noble or displaced noble. So immediately, as I conceived of his interactions with everyone, you know, he grew up in a you know, in a high society. Everything is done cloak and dagger, arm's length. There are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. So I envision all of his interactions are very transactional. I will be kind to those who can do can benefit me, and I have no time, or you know, will treat those who can't do anything for me rather poorly. And that's going to raise a lot of interesting role-playing opportunities, again, inside and outside the party, in terms of who you suck up to, who you offend, what's your bottom line. All of those decisions can be driven by that transactional nature. I can also envision there can be particular turning points where that dynamic improves or degenerates depending on what happens. So so he could, you know, perhaps learn to be better to others, or not everyone is to be evaluated purely on what can you do for me. Alternatively, if things go sideways for him in a bad way, if I roll bad, it can be aggravated. So so I can see a lot of evolution in a variety of different ways on that score. So with that, I think it's back to Al.
All right, so I have the question. What do you do to create a distinctive voice for your character? Now, we are intending this to be literal at this point, in that what are you doing to express yourself verbally as your character? I always like to have a character voice that's different in some way from my regular voice, so I can differentiate between what I am describing is going on and then actual lines that I'm going to be saying, especially considering that I do tend to prefer characters who do engage in some verbal wordplay. I do want them to make it clear, yes, DM, I am actually saying this. So in the opening, I did the voice of Sharkastic, my lizard folk. And in that case, I just decided to pitch my voice just a little bit higher. And then I ended up dragging out the S's just a little bit more menacing than usual. And then as far as my Duergar, Gunter Cavernborn, I'm doing an angry Irish dwarf for Mark's campaign right now, and I didn't want to fall into that again. So and Gunter's not very bright, and he's mean. So I decided that a nice, thick, northern British bully accent would do this. So he's going to be addressing people or this. And it's going to be very close to, for those of you familiar with Warhammer or Warhammer 40K, I'm kind of doing an orc voice for that one. So I want to try and make him menacing, and yet slow-witted at the same time. So frequently, whenever he's going to blow one of his intelligence rolls, there's going to be some comeback like, you think you're so smart, and that's going to be the takeoff point for a threat of some variety. We'll see how smart you are when you're picking your teeth out of that wall behind you. And then violence occurs. So that said, for people who don't like accents, and I've only got so much range. I'm not a voice actor. None of us are voice actors. We are not Critical Role. You'd all be happier, audience, if we were, but we're not. So we have to get by on being 30-year veterans of D&D, pat ourselves on the back. Instead of flashes in the pan. But anyway, you do not need to pick up that podcast fight.
Are you trying to start a flame war?
Why not? Let's get those views up, people.
Not with Matt Mercer, Al.
In any event, let's not take. All right, fine. I take that all back. Not really. Start the flame war. Anyway, so if you don't like voices, if you don't like accents or any of that tomfoolery, I advise just maybe change the words you use just a little bit. Try to simplify. If you're not doing a very bright character and you're ordinarily a pretty eloquent person, you want to simplify what you're saying a little bit, or speak a little bit more slowly when you're trying to do that. If you are a more easily excitable character, you're the little guy who wants to start the fight all the time, something like that, maybe speak a lot faster. And that way you're signaling to the DM that you've changed. And again, I teach speech as my main, speech and composition primarily. But as a speech teacher, when I'm teaching the oral interpretation speech that I have people do, I try to discourage accent use unless people are really confident and really want to do it. But just that little change to your voice when you're doing another character. So if you're doing a cop, for example, in a speech and you got pulled over, in that case, you make your voice a little bit more authoritative. Just a little bit of a shift is frequently enough to indicate that you are in character at that point. And that way, again, we're very clear on what your character is saying, and then what you are describing as the player, or any wisecracks you're making as a player, are in your regular voice.
Yeah, I think that it can take some courage if you don't have the acting background. It can take some courage to do the voice, and it's really speaking on behalf, I think, of all dungeon masters. It's really okay if you don't.
Oh yeah,
it's not something that you feel comfortable with. But as Al said, you can just make subtle changes, and that gives some very, very crucial signals to the DM, which the more that everyone kind of stays in character, the longer that great moment lingers, right? Of everyone being in the story, present in the story together. And the voice is one of those things that helps you do that. If you want to, one great way to do this is to pick out a character in fiction that you think your character is going to sound like, and you can listen to that, video loops of that character over and over. It gets maybe some catchphrases down. You can even look up YouTube videos and watch people instruct you on how to do impersonations of that character, which is awesome. Go YouTube. I did that. I had to in the game. I really wanted to have Mickey Mouse appear. My kids, right? So oh boy. I had to work on my Mickey Mouse, right? Come on, Pluto. And I just looked up a YouTube video of a guy doing Mickey Mouse, and we did Mickey Mouse for about 15 minutes. I was like, okay, that's good enough.
Yeah. It's for the kids.
Yeah, it's for the kids.
So along those lines, for one of Mark's games, I ended up playing. This is one of the ones we played over New Year's a ways back. I ended up playing an archivist, and I decided that I was going to do Sean Connery as the voice. And I ended up stealing the vocalization from Sick Boy his version of
Right for train spotting.
of Connery from Trainspotting.
Yeah.
And so I delivered it exactly like it's delivered in the book. It's got the issues out there for
the imitation of
Maumee.
the imitation voice of
yeah, Schmish Money Penny. Yeah, it worked better in scene, but still.
So I would also add, in addition to voice, I think sound effects should also play a role. So we had a campaign, and for whatever reason, I think I was playing some kind of melee fighter, and I was messing around, and I downloaded an app that had all sorts of kung fu noises, and had a great time with little kung fu kicks and wah, and I was amusing myself. I don't know about anybody else, but
We were having fun.
But yeah, so that was well, Mark's kids really liked it too. So that was another benefit. But at any rate, so I think sound effects can also play a useful role in emphasizing certain actions. Just enhancing the gameplay and making it more fun and interesting.
All right, so Chad, the microphone is over to you. Time to shine, buddy.
All right, bloody hell, guys, and put another shrimp on the Barbie.
Let's offend a few more.
That's my accent. Does your character have any reoccurring sayings or aphorisms? What can you plan ahead of time or steal from others? So this is a perfect question for Golden Child, without a doubt. This is going to be pretty much the biggest part of his personality. I really wanted to have him have wise sayings for every occasion, parables describing whatever situations they need to overcome, omens to find and decipher, and finally some final bit of wisdom at the end of the adventure to sum up what we learned, because knowledge is power. It's a bit overly ambitious, so I'm looking at TV shows, movies, and books to kind of supplement or give me ideas of what to use during the adventure. If nothing else, they have some quick generic sayings to have in my back pocket. Now, the key point in all of this for Golden Child is that he's not especially wise or intelligent, but he uses his full charisma and an overinflated view of himself that his knowledge will help enlighten the masses. This reminds me a lot of Michael Scott from The Office, earnest but offensive. Some of the quotes from that show that could lend itself to my character, and this may be more about describing him than really something he would say. Quote, "Do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be loved. But it's not like this compulsive need to be, like I need to be praised." Or sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where I'm going. I just hope I find it along the way. And would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me. I think these Michael Scott quotes reflect a lot of personality of what I wanted to instill in Golden Child, whether I actually use them or not. I also look for some actual drops of wisdom from the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. Take that pronunciation with a grain of salt, or as Golden Child would say, with whole grain. These would give me a framework of how I'd want to broadcast my sayings through Golden Child, whether as a direct quote or something that I could butcher. Here's a few general quotes from good old Lao. "The best fighter is never angry. Do you have patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? Silence is a source of great strength," which is probably one I'll have to use a lot. Or some popular adages like "little strokes fell great oaks," or "a friend to all is a friend to none." These great quotes also reminded me of a character from Mystery Men. His name was Sphinx, and he would often do a kind of a pair and contrast saying, such as things like, "He who questions training only trains himself at asking questions. For those who can't control their anger lets their anger control them." I'm thinking I could take something somebody said during an adventure and then turn it into one of those. Or even better, make up one that makes no sense. For example, "Care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner. But if you are a prisoner to their care, then you won't know what to think." And then just kind of let the thought trail off and hope no one notices. Then, of course, taking some popular sayings and having Golden Child turn them into something that makes sense for him, but kind of dilutes the message in the first place. Like, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a good pair of boots." The world that Golden Child sees is full of omens and signs that only he has the insight into seeing. And he wants to share it with everyone, especially if it's already happened or readily apparent. Like if a knight shoots out of the darkness at his friends, he might say, "I think there's danger ahead." Or if there's an eclipse, he might say, "It looks like dark times are upon us for at least a good 5 minutes." I also made a list of bad and good signs to be ready in case they occurred during the adventure. Not that Golden Child is superstitious, but maybe a little stitious. Also Michael Scott quote. Things like breaking a mirror, an upside-down horseshoe, knocking salt over, tea leaves, crystals, sayings from the oracles, that's what she said. And then finally, at the end of the adventure, I could come up with a moral or a story or some kind of parable. Like, he could say, I saw a herd of ants taking down a large bug. Let's be like the ant, and together we can kill bugs. So these are a few of the things I came up with while looking at actual quotes to both use and inspire my character. And with that, I'll leave you with one final quote from The Golden Child, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. There once was a boy who found a crying wolf because he was all alone. But when the boy tried to get the townspeople to help the crying wolf be happy, no one came. And that's why they're called lone wolves. Packs of lone wolves.
Nice.
All right, next.
I think this one is such a slam dunk, right? It's like one of those things where if you just put in like just the minimum amount of time to find some of this stuff, or and you can steal it from anywhere, as Chad has. I mean, you can steal it from TV, you can steal it. You can get a book of Bartlett's quotations, or like anyone who did aphorisms like La Rochefoucauld or Montaigne. Balthazar Gracian, I mean, like, or anyone who's like super quotable, you can steal their stuff, or like Chad says, you could just make it up.
Yeah.
And there are already classes that have this built in, right? There's the paladin has the oath that they take, depending on what kind of paladin they are. So automatically you have like this thing that you can work with. You can kind of flavor it the way you want. It's, think about the in Game of Thrones, the oath that the Rangers all take, right? Or in the Stephen King Gunslinger books, right? They have that, I don't shoot with my hand, I shoot with my heart. That kind of refrain, and all that stuff is really, really good. And just like I said, the minimal investment, and it just keeps paying off over and over again as you go through the game. And I just think it's really, really super fun, and an easy way to show a good quality of your character. Show their discipline or their faith, or just their perception of how the world works. It's role playing gold. It really is. Am I next?
You're up. Are you up?
You're next,
Mine?
Mark.
And on to Mark.
Oh, it ought to be. Okay.
Role playing gold.
I was really excited about that one. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to be talking for a while about this one too. Okay, so this one is how do you visualize your character's appearance? And this is such a great way to get into your characters, to think about what they look like. And you can start with kind of basic things like their physique, their hair, their eyes, maybe what clothing they wear. You can, and then kind of start to get further involved. Do they have like tattoos, piercings, adornments? Do they have accessories that they wear? A hat, some sort of signature piece like a cane or a pipe, or a staff. Maybe it's like carved in the shape of a hand or something. There's infinite kind of ways that you can customize just your possessions and the things that are on you, and kind of develop a sense of your character's appearance that way. You can also look at the things that they do, their spells and their abilities, and you can describe those, right? If your character's, the radiant energy that comes off of your character's smite, what does it look like? When your character casts a magic missile, is it like 3 screaming blue eagles that fly out and shriek as they hit the target? Just think about, simple kind of ways to make him unique to your character. So it's not just, oh, I smite them, or oh, I cast magic missile. Another great way to do this is ritual casting. I love ritual casting and its possibilities. Ritual casting, I think, is very undersold in the player's handbook, because it's this really, really fun way to take something that's both kind of have something that's advantageous to your character and has this really fun introduction to role playing and you know, working out like what is this ritual that your character is doing. Like the ritual has to last a while, so they've got a lot going on, and there's so many different ways that you can kind of describe your character and connect with, you know, how their magic, the source of their magic, and how they interact with it, and what the relationship is in a ritual. You know, is it cooler to say, oh well, I cast Layman's tiny hut and we go to sleep, or to say, I place 3 green candles in a triangle. I light them and acrid smoke comes out. As the smoke emits from the candles, I place an incredibly smooth ceramic bowl in the middle of the candles. And slowly I turn my hands around the bowl, whispering and blowing short puffs of air. As the smoke curls around the bowl, it gradually spreads out and surrounds the party. Sweat starts to bead on my forehead as I focus and focus. And suddenly the smoke clears and it solidifies into a giant protective sphere. We prepare to rest. So I think that maybe sounds a little bit cooler than just saying I cast a spell. So we can also find a lot of cool ways to look at things that are out there and help us develop our character. One of the things that we do, we play online using the Fantasy Grounds platform, and we have little character tokens you know, on screen for those games. And so, you know, either Al or us, we end up, you know, searching the internet for like using like a Google image search and trying to find like the perfect shot that represents our character. So that's one thing to look at. You can look at miniatures too. There's a lot of great miniatures. You know, you can type in just a search with some stuff about your character and come up with some cool stuff on, you know, Miniatures Market, WizKids, Reaper, looking at those places and looking at the miniatures. Or even better, you can customize your own miniature, make this 3D model of your character. And maybe, I'm sorry, Heroforge, maybe you don't want to shell out the, you know, 20 or 30 bucks for it, but you can use it as this kind of source of inspiration. And I'm just gonna share my screen here. Okay. All right, so using Heroforge, I created this 3D model of my character, Vic the Vulture, the Hobgoblin Wizard. And if you watched last week's episode, you know that Vic has this kind of unlikely proficiency in the weapon, the Maul, which he is holding in a very intimidating posture there. I also was able to make Vic kind of super tall and skinny. And then I started to kind of take some inspiration from what Heroforge had to offer. I love these hand wraps, right, and the foot wraps. I thought that would really kind of complement, and this, you know, rope belt or whatever, that really complement his kind of somewhat impoverished kind of scavenger nature. Like anything that he has is really kind of, all of his assets are magical, right? That's where he's putting all of his money. And he's got, you know, the potion bottle in the book there. There's his little rat familiar. Right down there at his feet. And he's definitely got this kind of, you know, intimidating facial expression and kind of like this don't mess with me look that I think is going to be his default expression. So you can see that, you know, not only was it kind of fun to put this together, but it also gave me some additional inspiration about my character. And now, you know, when I'm kind of envisioning Vic in my mind, I have this model to look at, you know, this kind of guy in these rags and wielding this ridiculously big hammer with a little rat at his feet there. So that's another way that you can use the tools out there to find some inspiration. Okay, so that's it for me. Let's go back to Mike.
So a rival can oftentimes be role-playing gold in terms of character interaction, driving the plot forward. When you roll bad, source of immense frustration. But again, a good rival lights the fires of competition and keeps things lively. So the question at hand for me is, do I have an ideal for a rival for my character? So another one of the characters that I made up is a character who has named himself Brother Shameless. Shameless because what he wants to do in his heart is just meditate upon the aspects of life, but has been forced to accompany the golden child. And so he feels that he has sacrificed his integrity to accompany who he believes to be a colossal fool. So he has christened himself Shameless. So of course his rival has to be the golden child, who he's nominally attending. So I envision it as somewhat of a Maxwell Smart Agent 99 dynamic, where he's just constantly looking down on the golden child, while at the same time being compelled to help him out of the messes that he creates. Although I could also see it going in a different way, more of a Inspector Clouseau, Cato kind of dynamic, where he's constantly trying to assault the golden child under the premise of making sure that he's keeping up with his training and whatnot. So I can see that dynamic, just loads of opportunity to just have a great time. And in fact, probably something I'm going to do is, of my own kind of count, is I'm going to kind of have a frustration meter. And when the frustration meter hits the maximum, he's going to really try and kill the golden child. And we'll see if he succeeds or not. I just think that something like that adds an element of unpredictability, and again, just makes the character really fun to play. So with that, over to Al.
All right, so what is your character's personal background or history? Now, the character backstory is a bit of a sensitive point in the D&D community, because if you spend any time on D&D forums or gamer D&D subreddits or whatever, you're going to see a lot of backstories. And you're going to see some very elaborate backstories. Some young people just love backstory, and they will write pages upon pages of loving description of everything their character has done up until this point. And I don't know if you've ever tried DMing with one of those backstories in mind, but you are going to remember maybe 3 things out of it. And that's going to be the best you can do. You can maybe mine a character's backstory for a little bit more depth, but really, when you're coming up with your character backstory, don't overplan, is my primary advice. Think about it.
And this is not to discourage you folks that have these thoroughly developed. I mean, go ahead, follow your muse. But Al is very correct. It's hard for dungeon masters to learn it all at once. And
heaven help you if we've got multiple of you in the same party, because then we got to give equal service to everybody, so it becomes really too much.
Yeah, so just be patient with us. If you need to remind us a few things about your character's background, don't hesitate to do that. But also maybe, try to keep things relatively brief.
Yeah, I say between 3 and 5 main things that you can really emphasize, and that you can even bring up in conversation with other players and that sort of thing. The kind of stuff that's more of a living backstory that can be really helpful. And with that and also think about the role that previous adventures are going to play in your backstory too. A lot of people think of their backstory as fixed. That this is my character, all of this crap that happened to me before any of you met me and before any of the game started. And that's not your whole character. You're going to be living. You're going to be doing stuff. You're going to be part of a new life. And that new life has got to be at least as important as your old life. And ideally, for the fun of everybody involved, it should be more important than your previous life.
Yeah.
So pay attention to what's going on in the present, and pay attention to any kind of weird recurring things that might show up. And feel free, if an NPC shows up or something like that, that survives their interactions with your party of murder hobos, in that case, talk to your DM and try to work out, well, I really like that NPC. Can maybe we do a scene again in the future? Maybe that person can come back. Again, that kind of talking with your DM and actually being actively involved in the DM's story and your story that you are helping to shape too, that is just going to make things a lot better on all involved. Again, your character's not a tabula rasa. They don't come into this totally blank, but don't predetermine everything about them from that backstory.
Yeah.
And then one final note, and this causes a lot of friction, I think, with it, like in probably productive friction, I think. And this is the tension between what fiction writers call a flat character and a rounded character. The rounded character is a character who learns something over the course of the story. They gain some kind of deeper knowledge and they evolve in some way. It might not be a good way, but they attain some kind of knowledge about the world that helps deepen their connection to it, as opposed to a flat character who was already awesome or already sucky at the beginning and continues to be exactly that way throughout the story. Now, I do think we all have to think of our characters as round. At some point, you do want to bear in mind that there's probably going to be some changes that happen. Now, the tricky part is if you have a character arc in mind. So, Shameless is arc of rivalry with the Golden Child, and the Golden Child's arc of, am I going to discover wisdom, or am I going to am I going to discover that I'm actually a terrible person and continue to do that? These are great starting points. But the problem is with a lot of character arcs, we either never get around to developing them, or we develop them too quickly. Like like if you say my character is going to be on a redemption arc, and suddenly in the first game you're like, oh, I now apologize for being a jerk. No, we gotta know that you're a jerk for at least a few sessions before that arc actually makes sense. So be patient with some of your stuff, but not too patient, because then it'll never happen. So it's always a balance of how long's the campaign going to be, how do you feel like you're going to be playing, and then after a little bit of time, then take the steps and get on it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to wait forever, because your character might die. Again, you do have to get there eventually.
I was all focused on what I was going to say, and then you started bringing up character death again, and it's like this weird recurring theme. Actually,
yeah, it's almost like there's a premonition going on there or something.
It's funny that 4th edition hasn't come up yet.
I was just going to say 4th edition.
So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to try to make it brief. So talk to your DM, right? Your DM can help you with all of this. Your DM can help you make sure that the character arc is satisfying and hits kind of the right places in game chronology that it's supposed to. If you're having trouble creating this roundness, right? If you need a bridge from your past to your present, have your DM have an NPC at the beginning of your character that knows you from the past and you can interact with in your present, and be this great bridge. In fact, like a lot of the characters, their character backgrounds, they already start with some sort of contact, and so that can be, this character that Wizards has so generously provided you with can be, a great help throughout the campaign to give the player this kind of constant connection to their past, but let them role play it in the present. But yeah, the key is just to communicate with your dungeon master, and they will help you fulfill this as best as they possibly can.
Oh, and one final note, when we're talking about character backgrounds, sometimes it is best to leave things a mystery I give you the Kessel Run. The Kessel Run took on a sense of wonder and added a lot of implied depth to Han Solo. It's okay to not actually ever develop what happened. You can leave things a mystery, or you can always refer back to a previous moment. In my college group, they're a group of mercenaries that got their actual recognition from their larger mercenary company when they all survived their first mission. The implication was in the previous game, people kept dying. So we never got around to actually talking about, so what actually happened in those previous sessions. We kind of just left them as this glorious mess that maybe at some point we could come back to. But again, we didn't determine everything. So sometimes it's good to leave those gaps, or to just have a reference to something mysterious that either you or your DM can either develop or not, as the case may be later on.
I think a great example of that would be like Raiders of the Lost Ark. You remember the scene where Indiana Jones meets Marion in the bar, and all you know is that they've got a past together, and she says something to the effect of, "I was a child, I didn't know what I was doing," and he goes like, "You knew what you were doing." Period. Stop. End of story. They don't tell you how it went down. It's left to the imagination, but it supplies a depth to the character interaction that pulls into the present and moves as a starting point from there forward. So less is more.
I can see that being a golden child saying, like, "Are you using your imagination, or is your imagination using you?"
You could also probably pull a lot of great sayings from like Willy Wonka.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Or the internet fortune cookie generator.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, and over to you, Mark.
All right.
Like this one.
Where are we now?
It's about animals.
Oh yeah. So so what about animal companions and hench people, right? And I like this because it's really a good way. So there are going to be some reluctant role players out there that have these relationships with their pets, and the very, very kind of comfortable way of interacting with their animals, and they might actually, like, as a way to kind of get into role playing or whatever, like they may have a familiar animal companion or so forth, and have that kind of familiar relationship and way of interacting that helps them kind of bring out the character. I think this is like a great way, if you D&D playing pet lovers out there, you like need an intro, a way to kind of get into your character. Like, try having a pet. And you, like I said, there's the animal companion, there's the familiar, there's plenty of ways to get a familiar, and there's even the various figurines of wondrous power that transform into animals. You can take the Salvatore route. So you can use if you're DM, you did start, you're an animal lover and want to have the animal kind of interactions, your DM can provide you with an animal too, like even a mount, or maybe later on in the game, one of these figurines. And it gives you these nice, comfortable, familiar interactions that you can use to build on. I've seen players do it with great success. They get into their pets, and you see kind of more of their character through their interaction with this animal. And like having a hench person or a sidekick, has a lot of some of the same advantages. It can also be great for players who need someone to riff off of, someone to be their straight person, or that they can interact with, and maybe they're having trouble like connecting with another player in the game and finding role-playing foils. So bam, give them a sidekick, give them a hench person, and they can torture that that individual with their personality all they want. No, you can give all these these opportunities for that player to interact with their hench person, this kind of constant role-playing device that's always there. And you can also, this works especially well for characters who are evil or playing like power-hungry characters, right? They have this constant person that they can remind everyone how evil they are by ordering them around or being really, really mean to them. It kind of gives a nice opportunity to constantly show, if they're not getting those opportunities, in the kind of in the D&D world already, it gives them ways to show other people just how awful they are. So my character Vic has a pet. He has a rat familiar, and he is going to. I'm going to kind of use that to show how this kind of different side of his personality, right? To show how he's a little more kind of multifaceted than he appears, and so he's going to be a total jerk to people, but like really, really, really kind to his rat, and very protective, and has this kind of relationship where the rat's also a survivor. The rat's been through it all with him, and they have this connection together. But there's plenty of other interactions that you can develop with your companions, and turn something that's kind of a class feature or whatever into something that really, really helps you connect with your character's personality and once again their worldview and their values. All right, who's next?
That would be me. So kind of continuing some of the themes we've discussed before, considering the issue of how you are likely to interact with non-player characters of various types. So this is pretty easy for Brother Shameless. Brother Shameless wants nothing to do with the world. So he's going to treat everyone he's going to first ignore. If he has to interact with someone, his default is going to be dismissiveness or contempt, unless it's one of those rare individuals of some kind of spiritual nature who he feels he deserves respect for. But he really has no desire to interact with the secular world whatsoever. He just feels like he's constantly bathing in a sea of filth. And his attitude is going to reflect that. Careless Whisper, on the other hand, it's going to be very person specific. I envision him having the kind of playboy public persona, deadly assassin by night, and so the way that those two characters, those two kind of day and night interact are going to be very different. If he's doing the playboy type, it might be a lot of bluster with nothing really backing it, as opposed to the assassin type, who will not suffer fools gladly at all, and has the muscle to back it up. Again, as I mentioned before, if it's not of a combative nature, but it's more just an interaction, again, it's going to be very transactional in nature, always looking to how to maximize his own profit, not necessarily at the expense of others, but is not going to go out of his way to really do anything substantive unless he perceives there to be some kind of benefit in it for himself. So he's always looking for what's the angle for me, even if that proves to create awkwardness or bad feelings, or throws a real monkey wrench into what the DM had intended for a dynamic to play out. But again, I think that's going to be good role-playing gold, as long as he doesn't get killed doing it, which is is a possibility as well if he overestimates his own capabilities. So again, I think it's going to be very time and place specific, but can see a lot of different potential ways to interact with different characters under different circumstances. So, and back to you, Al.
All right. So the question that I'm addressing here is, what kind of campaign-specific devices could shape role-playing. Now, as the DM, this question is natural for me to field. So there are some elements of this campaign that are designed to give ready-made hooks for the players to interact with. So first of all the players are in a gang. They are in a gang of various non-human races that have banded together to protect themselves against the more aggressive human gangs in the area that are operating more with the blessing of the authorities. So already there's a structure of support. The players, even if they don't the characters, even if they don't particularly like each other, do have a reason to stick together and to protect each other, because again, self-preservation ultimately. The other gangs are ready-made rivals and villains. Also, the guards are going to provide a regular level of danger, in the sense that they present the problem of cops for any kind of criminal enterprise or oppressed group, in that not only do you have to hide criminal activity from them, but they're likely to stick their noses in any number of innocent situations and make things worse. So that is a dynamic that we'll have to deal with. Then on top of that, I've done a decent amount of courses in 18th century lit. And my girlfriend was a specialist in 18th century criminology, criminal lore. So I ended up stealing an idea from the Beggar's Opera, and that is the idea of what they call the thief taker. And a thief taker is sort of a citizen with kind of a letter of marque level of operation from the government to find thieves and to turn them over to the authorities. And they work sort of in a weird criminal way themselves, because they frequently take bribes. So these dirty guys are going to be involved in dealing with the gangs generally themselves, and they're going to serve the role of like sort of a weird combination of snitch and parole officer, in that they are a point of contact with the authorities, but they are not exactly trustworthy themselves, and they are involved in criminal activity themselves as well. So they're the thief taker from the Beggar's Opera is Peachum, and he is a delightful character. He is an evil bastard all the way through, and it makes the play a delight. So there'll definitely be a thief taker that the players are in contact with. On top of that, this is a monotheistic world. So all of the players who are oriented towards religion, none of them took clerics. So in this campaign world, the clerics are generally more orthodox characters. They tend to represent the established religious hierarchy, which we call the unity in this campaign. The fact that we've got a druid, and druids in D&D are often figured as being servants of sort of an older religious system, the old gods. Again, if you're familiar with Game of Thrones, that dynamic's there as well with folks from the north. This idea of an older deity that might be beyond the current system in some way really makes conflict. You have a heretic already in the middle of the game. When we have an angel who is moving among humans, this also establishes quite a bit of ready-made conflict, because many fiction writers have speculated what happens when actual divine creatures interact with us, and usually we're pretty bad to them. So this will be a nice point of conflict. Again, we are scorning the possible side, a possible messenger from the divine itself, and we're not listening. Again, this is a standard policy. Again, it'll happen here too. So all of these dynamics are designed to try and build in a certain amount of conflict already, and some of the players, based on their classes and backgrounds, are already interacting with some of these components, and then the campaign itself will introduce a few more. So always be familiar with what campaign your DM's coming up with. Talk to your DM about what your role is going to be in this bigger game, and you'll find that you can get quite a bit of interesting dialogue going. And again, this is a story you're ultimately working on together. The DM can do all kinds of development. The DM can toil and slave away at creating an incredibly elaborate story, but without you, it is nothing. And ultimately, the players are the ones who are going to shape how that story ultimately plays out. So don't underestimate your power in this situation. Again, you have the ability to add to this story. And if you're working together, you're going to find that this is going to turn out a lot better. All right, and Mark, over to you.
Okay, so how can I use downtime to develop my character? Downtime is a formal mechanic introduced in Xanathars, although it doesn't necessarily have to use the set rules in the game. I mean, downtime can be whatever you and your DM decide it's going to be, but they give you suggestions on things that you can do when your character is not out adventuring. And these are fantastic opportunities. It's especially good because it gives players a way to show facets of the character that maybe they haven't had opportunities to do yet in the game, right? If your DM hasn't provided you yet with a scenario where you can demonstrate this thing about your character, well, you can use downtime to show that part about them. You can, if they're have an interest in a particular area that they haven't been able to explore, they can use downtime to do it. And they can also, do numerous other developmental things, interact with their world, catch up with NPCs. You can use it for kind of more quantitatively advantageous purposes. Maybe you can use it to find magic items, or develop proficiency in a skill. But even those things that have those very, very tangible in-game benefits can be used as role-playing opportunities. Now, my two characters, Q and Vic, would probably approach downtime very differently. I can see Q using it as an opportunity. Q is my half-elven bard. I can see him using it as an opportunity to create art, right? So he's out maybe doing some graffiti. He could be engaged in some diplomatic activities, right? He's a peacemaker, so he could be using these times when he's not trying to stab someone to actually go out and build some bridges. He could also work on some of his dance moves. I see him as kind of having these various b-boy dance moves, so he could be practicing his moves, or maybe seeking out other dancers to kind of form a dance squad. But the various possibilities. Vic, I kind of see more tunnel vision, right? I can see Vic is not going to have this rich artistic social life. He's going to be doing one thing and one thing alone, and that's looking for more magic. So he's going to be out there looking for magic items, or working on ways to be maybe he's going to work on using the alchemist tools, learning those, or the herbalism kit, so he can learn more about various production techniques for things, magical items. So yeah, I can see him kind of being very, very focused in that direction. But once again, this is a great way for you and the DM to show parts of your character that just really haven't gotten out in the campaign yet. It's definitely, don't squander that opportunity. Is that our last question? Or are we doing the
all group question?
Yeah, why don't you take that one, Chad?
Sure. Let me start and share the screen. So, yes, share. You're not sharing. Sure. All right. So
Nice.
I kind of come from a graphic design background, so visuals are very big for me. So a lot of it was just taking a look at kind of different people's take on the Goblin, and mine was kind of a cross between. You see, there's like Baby Yoda and Smeagol, though the nice half of Smeagol, not the twisted evil version that tries to do him bad. And so one of the other things I saw while I was looking at this was in the Dungeons and the Player's Handbook was a section called Trinkets. And I looked at some of the trinkets, and I envisioned him. He had, like, one of the trinkets was a broken whistle. So I can see him carrying it around and blowing on that fruitlessly. Or they had a pipe that blows bubbles. And I can see him being sophisticated and sitting back and blowing bubbles. But a lot of the storyboard is kind of a mood board. And so it was kind of looking at this small but kind of happy, friendly person you don't really want to be mean to. And then for the Asmar, for the Golden Child, with the charisma of 17, I wanted somebody very saintly. Obviously, I don't think the Asmar has full-blown wings until like 3rd level when he can manifest it. But just that he's really in touch with the divine, but he's just really clueless about everything. So, and that's my guys.
Am I the only one who couldn't see the other image board?
I couldn't see it either.
Yeah, I think you might want to go back and show the Golden Child image board. There you go.
There we go.
All right. Yeah, as you can see, there's a little picture that I drew over here where, he's bending down and you've got the holy wings behind him. Let's see if I do. I don't like this thing.
I don't like this very much.
And it's gone. All right. But I also, did some graphics and some drawings of different things. And one of the things I had done was draw his little staff for Eek. It's a goblin, and it's got like this half-eaten rat that's part of his totem for a druid.
No.
Yeah. You're interested in eating your bread and nipples. But, he's friends with rats, but, it's also a circle of life. Sometimes you get hungry. So. And that's kind of a lot of the inspiration, visualization that I get for my character. So, next.
Yeah, so I think I talked about it a little bit in the last episode. For Q, I definitely took inspiration from the book Can't Stop, Won't Stop, which talked about these kind of 3 various aspects of that combined to create hip hop culture in New York in the late 70s and early 80s, and so I thought about this character who was like a b-boy and did graffiti and did like all of these things. It just kind of seemed to mesh naturally with some of Al's campaign inspirations. So yeah, so that and the campaigner definitely inspired that character. And I think that for Vic, I really was looking at the material in Bolo's Guide to Monsters. When I came up with the idea to create a hobgoblin, I kind of looked at that, supplemental material about, they do a nice piece on all the goblinoids in there, and just kind of imagining the kind of culture that he would come out of and that he would reject, and realizing what the consequences of that would be, and kind of molding the character around that. I also definitely wanted to play 2 characters that really contrasted each other, right? And so I feel like, personality-wise, one character who's really trying to build bridges and the other one who's just trying to get everyone to leave him alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my inspirations.
So for me, let me share the screen. Careless Whisper, obviously, I'm definitely thinking, an 80s era George Michael, feathered blonde hair, earring, breezy kind of clothes, just real pretty boy, type look to him, which again contrasts the public versus the private. But that was my guiding inspiration there for Careless Whisper. For Brother Shameless, it's actually been a little bit more evolutionary in terms of, as I learn more about what Chad's character is going to be like, that's helped me to develop more of the ideas of what I want Brother Shameless to be. It originally just started off as a character sketch of, well, he just doesn't like this other guy, to really just, you know, fleshing it out. You know, if he's going to be the breezy, irresponsible, negligent one, then my character needs to be the very severe, you know, always follow the rules.
You're gonna be anti-Christ, aren't you?
So I've got a ruler and I'm not afraid to use it. So comedic.
Yeah,
gold.
that definitely is a different direction than kind of your original.
It is, but I'm
like
liking
how that's evolved.
I'm really kind of excited about playing this because I think it's going to be really fun. Like I said, especially at every opportunity to inflict corporal punishment on the Golden Child.
What could go wrong?
Comedic
In
gold.
the words of Teenage Me, but we're on the same team.
Oh.
We are still
right,
on the same team. The goal is just different.
All right, so what about you, Al?
All right, so I really like using music as inspiration for characters, and because I have no musical talent of my own, I have to draw on that of others. I'm a big fan of using Spotify for creating playlists, and I'll do this as a DM. I got to the point where with some games, I would actually do a full playlist for the session beforehand as sort of a, here, listen to this to kind of get in the mood for it. I really like the idea of music going along with the game, but I have never actually been able to work that balance out right. Because usually it's either too loud or too distracting. It's really hard to use music with a lot of the online platforms. So it hasn't really worked out as something to go along with the game. Someday I will master how to do this.
Yeah,
But,
I think the key is like having a player do it. Like because like you're already doing so much
yeah.
as a DM to like you should have like an official game DJ, right?
Yeah.
Someone like there kind of like to set the mood.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of not using orchestral stuff, because again, I love the Conan soundtrack, and as we've already revealed, we all are big fans of Conan, but you've heard this 8 million times during game sessions. You can't listen to that Henry V soundtrack the entire time you're playing. You gotta find some other stuff to listen to, for crying out loud. So I like a mixture of music types, just whatever goes along with the action. I'm a really big fan of letting Western imagery leak into D&D a lot. I like spaghetti Western soundtrack stuff and things like that to go along with fights. If there's a really big dramatic fight coming up, I'll use something like that. For the playlist that I came up with for the campaign itself, the combination is I'm going for a combination of, at this point, it's mostly been a little bit of gangster rap combined with a little bit of Australian and British hooligan music. And the idea here is to try to get both the soccer riot kind of feel, and then also the idea of living in sort of a dystopian, like, society's out to get you kind of situation. Right. That it's not just the cops, it's not just your rivals, right. It's kind of everything. The whole
the deck is stacked against you.
Is bad. So I've been trying to play that up, and I still haven't come up with playlists for my actual characters, but for some of my parties, I've come up with like themed playlists, like a song for each character, just to kind of get, again, people into the mood and to start thinking about how the session's going to go. So again, I highly recommend it. I think it works great. And if you're a more audio influenced person, this is a way that you kind of get yourself psyched up for playing, and to get deeper into that character and think about kind of the attitude you want to embody. And music frequently does this better than writing. Again, sometimes musicians tap into something they don't even know they're tapping into ultimately. Music can bring a lot of depth and can convey stuff you didn't even necessarily intend to convey ultimately. It's a very deep creative process for both listener and performer. So is that, I think that's everything we wanted to talk about there.
Yeah,
As far as inspiration for characters, again, there's a lot of ways to get it, and that's one of the things we definitely wanted to talk about, since all of our creative processes are pretty different.
Yeah, hopefully we gave you kind of like a multitude of options there, places to look. You know, obviously the using the internet has been very helpful to all of us. So, you know,
Yes.
get out there, look for YouTube videos, search for songs on whatever kind of streaming, you know, service you have or whatever. Use the tools available to you to explore your character and really seek out some sources that have value for you in this development. You know, once again, hopefully we've showed you also that there's lots of different ways, lots of entry points for you to start your path up Character Mountain, and really kind of get to a place where you feel like your character is realized, and you know who they are and what they do and what they stand for. And hopefully everyone else in your group at this point, you know, will too. It's really, really fun to play when everyone gets to that point, right, where you can kind of almost already predict what Careless Whisper is going to do, or how you know, how the Golden Child is going to react in a particular situation. Those moments are fantastic, and really bring you together, you know, as a gaming group, and just make the session that much more magical. And we, you know, that's what we want for all of you. We definitely have it at our games, and we hope that all of this will help you get to that point. Now, do we want to preview what's coming up next?
Absolutely. Preview of coming attractions.
Next week on Dungeons and Decisions. So actually not next week. It usually takes us longer than a week to get these together. We will end up playing through a few scenarios as our characters, and you, the viewers at home or listeners at home, can watch the magic unfold.
All right, so until then, folks, take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time on Dungeons and Decisions.
Bye.
Hey, Nate.